For me, I think grief is a loss of connection. It's an expression of a broken heart. So grief comes in many forms and shapes. It could be the death of a loved one. It could be the death of a marriage. It could be betrayal. It could come in the form of a parent who's suffering from dementia, and as an adult child watches that, goes through that experience of watching that parent decline, there's real grief and loss there. So it's definitely a loss of connection. There's heartbreak and despair involved in grief.
But do you think that there can be a positive light in grief?
Grief is a very individual experience. It's as unique as your fingerprints. So the choice to shut down or expand, become wide open, is entirely up to the person who's grieving. Some people shut down because of grief and loss, and they suffer through many, many years of misery. And there are some others who are expanded by the experience of grief. So they allow their souls to awaken to something more purposeful, intentional, and meaningful. So each person's experience of grief is very different depending on how they choose to receive that experience. So that's my best answer.
Okay. What exactly is your role in the International Grief Council?
I think the International Grief Council makes a very important truth available to the world, which is that the three of us who come from very different countries, cultures, faith backgrounds, years of experience, we all still spoke the universal language of grief and heartbreak. We experienced it in different ways, but we spoke the same language. And everyone who's human will experience loss in their life at some point. So I think my being a Hindu and having gone through my traditional experience of grief and mourning my mother lends a special emphasis to the way I perceived it and the lessons I received through that experience of loss in how I found my purpose and meaning in life. So each one of us has our unique stories, and through those stories I think we knit together many of the common threads of the grieving experience.
You mentioned at one point that you, at a point in your life, you went and helped people as they were dying. What do you tell someone as they're facing death?
You don't say anything. You just are the loving, sacred container for whatever they're experiencing. Because when it comes to those last few weeks or days of life, there is nothing to be said, there is nothing to be done. So try not to fix somebody who's on their deathbed is my main message. It's important to be present to the experience, and many people who are at that stage of life will come up with questions and concerns that they have about the afterlife, about the death experience. Will it be painful? Will I see my loved ones again? They will cry. And as someone who sits with the dying, I believe that it is my role to help them express that, the beingness. Just be present to their experience, whatever it is. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to tell them something comforting or consoling, because there is nothing consoling or comforting about leaving your loved ones behind. So I am just available for whatever experience they are going through.
So what are some ways people have turned the pain of their loss into a life of meaning and purpose?
There are so many examples if we look around us. Mothers Against Drunk Driving was started by a mother whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver. She turned the pain of her daughter's loss into a purpose in such a meaningful way that it's now a global organization that serves so many others. A friend of mine, Benjamin Allen, lost his entire family. His wife and both his sons died. And he helps so many people who are grieving today because of everything that he experienced and how he was able to be present to his own pain. He teaches people the lessons that came to him. So that's another great example of someone turning the energy of pain into the energy of purpose.
Okay.
'Cause the truck is now gone. Okay. 'Cause the truck is now gone. 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 'Cause
question. Do you have any words of advice you'd like for the audience to take away?
I would say instead of shutting down because of grief, open yourself up and be present to the pain. Feel your feelings. There's no shame in grief, there's no judgment in grief. Grief is a common universal experience. So the more we are present to our own pain, the more we are able to reach out and connect with others who are walking in similar shoes. So grief is the great leveler. Don't have shame around it. Don't judge your grief. Don't worry about how long it's taking for you to get through this cycle of grief. Just be present to the pain, feel your feelings, cope with it, help others, reach out to community. That's the best way to experience and go through grief and get on the other side.